You are watching HealthTech for Patients. To open our first roundtable, we have our distinguished panel of speakers ready and on stage. Please remember to ask your questions on the platform, which will then be transferred to the panel for discussion later on. So, to open and to moderate this first roundtable, it is my pleasure to welcome Alain Herrera. Alain, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alison. It's really a pleasure to be here. And good afternoon to most of you, and perhaps also good morning to some of you. As highlighted by Marivonne, non-communicable disease has a high burden in the health ecosystem. The non-communicable diseases, they kill 41 million people each year, the equivalent to 74% of the global death. In this context, how can we act together to improve prevention and optimize the patient journey? This objective can not be achieved if we do not all work together. Institutional actors, medical doctors, health professionals in general, investors, and above all, patients and patient representatives. This is why we have gathered these different stakeholders around the table this afternoon. I'm very happy to moderate this roundtable, which is devoted to such an important topic and which brings such key players. So we will first have the opportunity to listen from Mr. John Ryan. John is the Acting Deputy General Director and Director of Public Health, Health and Food Safety Directorate General at the European Commission. Unfortunately, John could not be physically with us, but he recorded his message, and after we will ask our panelists to react before moving to the various presentations and the general discussion. Our first speaker will be Mia Bajramagić, patient living with type 1 diabetes. She's a physician, and she's project coordinator at the International Diabetes Federation Europe, IDFE. As project coordinator with IDFE, she works in patient-oriented and clinical-based EU-funded projects like Trials at Home, ISLET, and many others. She will be followed by Dr. Linas Dabasinskas. Linas is the Global Medical Director for Hypertension and Dyslipidemia at Global Medical and Patient Affairs at Servier. He has over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. He has seen a significant shift towards a greater patient focus, particularly in the field of cardiometabolic diseases. And at Servier, he is committed to driving therapeutic progress in this area, which, as we already said, continue to be a major cause of morbidity and mortality worldwide. Then, we will have Cristina Niculescu, Life Science Investment Specialist at the European Investment Bank, the EIB. Cristina is working in EIB as a life science specialist, and she is part of the Life Science and Health Division of the Project Directorate. But before, she worked in the biotech field. Between 2009 and 2016, she worked at Transgene in France. Transgene is a biopharmaceutical company belonging to the Institut Mérieux, and Cristina was developing immunotherapeutic products in oncology and in infectious diseases. So now, the presentation being done, we will listen to John Ryan.
Kind invitation to join your meeting today on non-communicable diseases from prevention to treatment. I wanted to speak about three topics today. First of all, the general approach of the European Commission to non-communicable diseases prevention and treatment. Secondly, to speak to you about the European Cancer Plan. And thirdly, to mention to you about the forthcoming initiative on mental health. So the Commission, having reflected with the member states and with stakeholder organizations, proposed an approach to non-communicable diseases, which emphasizes the importance of the international framework, the Sustainable Development Goals and the World Health Organization disease-specific targets. And based on that, and based on the fact that non-communicable diseases represent 80% of the disease burden in Europe, the Commission proposed an approach which would entail priority setting of our work on non-communicable diseases every year with the member states. Every year, on the basis of a commonly agreed document, the Commission asks the member states to choose which are the areas of work in non-communicable diseases that they would wish to prioritize for the following year, N+1. And on that basis, the Commission organizes a call for best practices. These best practices are evaluated and published on a portal. And then for the topics which the member states have prioritized, could be cardiovascular, it could be diabetes, it could be nutrition, it could be physical activity. The Commission will then propose the relevant best practice initiatives which would address those particular diseases. If 14, 15, 20, 27 member states decide to pick up one of these priority topics and to support the best practice initiative, the financing will be made available by the EU for Health programme. EU for Health programme is the financial instrument which we use to support public health initiatives in the European Union. This is a process that's been developed on the basis of a common document over a number of years. It's been rolled out with the member states. The most recent development is the support which we give to non-governmental organizations, patient groups, health professionals, in order to enable them to accompany the member states in implementing these best practices. So on the one hand, you have a annual selection of priorities. You have the selection of best practices intended to address those priority areas. You have member states voluntarily participating. And finally, you have support given to NGOs and health professionals to accompany the whole process. This process takes account of the fact that many non-communicable diseases have common elements. The determinants may be similar or the same. Therefore, it makes sense to have an approach where different health determinants can be taken on board when addressing the problem. We regularly discuss all of this with member states and with our stakeholder community, and the process is kept under constant revision. Second area of work which I wanted to mention to you concerns the European Cancer Plan. When President von der Leyen took over as President of the Commission, she chose the topic of cancer as being a flagship topic for her Commission. We developed a European Cancer Plan, which does not only restrict itself to health, but also looks at the other policy levers at the European Union level, which might be relevant to the cancer file. And therefore, we have a health in all policies approach, which is divided into prevention, early detection, treatment and care, and finally survivorship and patient quality of life. And on the basis of this plan, a number of actions have been identified, and we're now in the process of implementing those actions. For example, in the area of the right to be forgotten for cancer patients, so that they can benefit from their financial rights and not be stigmatized or discriminated against because of the fact that they had a cancer diagnosis earlier in life. We have also revised the scientific guidelines on screening, and these are now being implemented in the member states. And on the prevention side, there are actions in the areas of alcohol, tobacco, nutrition, and so on, physical activity as well. So this action plan is interesting to the extent that it includes things like taxation for alcohol and tobacco, but also improving the quality and access to radionuclear medicine, the avoidance of carcinogenic substances in the workplace, and a number of other policy initiatives which go beyond the traditional health portfolio. And we organize regularly meetings in order to present the state of play and the work that's going on. To mention that this European Cancer Plan is steered in close contact with the health ministries of the member states, but also with stakeholders and associating the research authorities, because the cancer plan and the research on cancer are closely linked for the purposes of the cancer plan, which, by the way, has a budget of 4 billion euros over a period of 7 years. Third point I wanted to mention to you concerns the mental health initiative, which is planned by the Commission for June of this year. Now, since COVID has taken place, we've noticed a sharp upturn in the number of people seeking assistance for mental health issues. And we've also seen a lot of pressure on people because of lockdowns, because of school closures, because of isolation, and because of the general stress of the COVID situation, which has made many people feel less strong in the sense of mental health resilience. Therefore, the President of the Commission decided last November that we should have a new action plan on mental health, which is in the process of being finalized at the moment and will be produced in June of this year. And it will also take a similar approach to the cancer plan by having chapters on prevention, on treatment and access to treatment in particular, but also on quality of life and on the rights of people with mental health, particularly in the areas of discrimination and stigma. So you can see that given the heavy burden of non-communicable diseases in Europe, the Commission has been anxious to promote dynamic, innovative approaches to dealing with prevention and treatment of non-communicable diseases. We have put in place a number of policy approaches, both for non-communicable diseases in general, but also for specific conditions like cancer and mental health. And I do look forward to the discussion with the other colleagues who are online and in the different roundtables in order to see what ideas you're coming up with, which could perhaps then contribute to this whole process. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today, and have a successful meeting.
Well, so turning to you, how do you react to this declaration? Cristina, I would like to start with you because I would like to know how the EIB is using this recommendation and how do you translate this recommendation into your investment strategy?
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you for inviting the European Investment Bank, so myself, to this very important meeting. I would like to say that I'm here to, of course, explain what the European Investment Bank is doing in the life science and health sector and non-communicable diseases more specifically. But I would like also to stress that I'm also here to hear more from patients and other organizations, pharma and beyond, to hear how we can do even more patient-centric approaches in our investment. So I'm here also to learn and to spread the word, if I can say, in our investment strategies to even go deeper in a more patient-centric approaches in our investment. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to learn as well. So coming back to your question, European Investment Bank is the bank of the European Union, and I think that is the largest multilateral development bank in the world. We invest in Europe as a major focus, but we also have European Investment Bank Global, because we want to reach people beyond the European borders. So European Investment Bank is supporting projects that promote the European Union policy projects. So we implement and invest in projects that make the European Union stronger. We have policies and we have investment areas, and of course we align with the European Commission strategy policies in our investment. So we follow and we implement in our plans the policies that Mr. John Ryan just presented. So of course innovation, digitalization, health are the cornerstone of the European Investment Bank policies and investment priorities. And what we like to stress that being in Europe or beyond Europe, all these projects, especially in health and life science, should have, let's say, three major components: should be safe, should be effective, should be accessible, and healthcare should be universal for all. So we stress a lot the Sustainable Development Goals put in place by the World Health Organization, and to reach this universal health coverage. Coming back to the three specific areas that Mr. John Ryan presented, first of all, we would like to have the same, let's say, systematic approach in our investments to cover both health, so hospitals, so primary health care, but also private innovative companies bringing innovative solutions, and we will discuss later, across all these areas, from prevention, being vaccines against, let's say, pathogen with let's say, cancerogenic potential, being early detection, so we have very good pipeline into this area, treatment and follow-up. And so we mirror, if you would like to, if I can say, the investment policy and the investment, in our investment policies and in our investment practices, the European Commission, let's say, strategies and priorities, being in cancer, being in mental health, and other non-communicable diseases as well.
Thank you. Mia, as a patient, what we heard is what you expect from the European instances.
So thank you so much, Alain. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to HealthTech for Care for organizing this event. It's such an important topic. So as Alain mentioned, I'm the project coordinator at IDF Europe. I'm also a person living with type 1 diabetes, so I know both sides of the industry, both as a healthcare professional and as a patient. So I think what Ryan mentioned is implementing the cancer policy on the European level at the EU Parliament, now coming up to the mental health policy in June. And also we implemented a new diabetes resolution just this past November. This is all a starting point to, I would say, a new era for patients, where the patients are at the center of the conversation. They're not somewhere behind the scenes. Maybe you can get a glimpse of them. The patients are the center of the conversation, but working along with the industry, working along with the healthcare professionals is honestly, it's the best recipe for success, because for many years and decades, we have had gaps in the treatments and outcomes of patient, let's say, even quality of life and both their long-term health. So yeah, I'm excited to see the new era of what is going to come up next.
And you, Linas, as are you integrating this in your, what you call your patient offers strategy?
Yeah, so thank you, Alain. I think that now in the pharmaceutical industry, we see huge change towards more patient centricity, towards involvement of patients from the beginning of research and development until the later stages. So all these initiatives, I think, are very important to find common ground and to work, to better collaborate together in order to find better solutions for patients. And later I will speak about prevention. So this is one of the areas where we can improve significantly. Yeah.
Thank you. So we can move now to the presentation. We will start with you, Mia.
Sure. So thank you. So Alain has already introduced me, so I will not waste everybody's time with that. But to give you a little bit of a backstory, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes almost 10 years now. When I think back, I had like phases in my, let's say, life with diabetes. I was diagnosed, and then I was motivated to get my health in check, and then at some point I got tired of it because it was every day, all day, and then there was no community because it was the era before technology and before sensors. So you couldn't basically see in the crowd if somebody also had diabetes. You could only know if you knew the person or if somebody else knew it. And then we got the technology, and then we came with this revolution of checking blood sugars through CGMs or flash glucose monitors, and then you had a sense of community. Even though you never spoke to the person, you could get a glimpse of somebody in the crowd wearing a sensor and say, oh, they can understand my situation, but we don't know each other. And then fast forward, I went to medical school because I was very motivated to kind of bring to the table both experiences of a healthcare professional and a patient. And then after that, I joined IDF Europe as a project coordinator, being based, basically, my role is clinical-based and patient-oriented EU-funded projects, along with other obligations, but we do projects like Trials at Home and ILET, where Trials at Home is something that it's a project looking at decentralized clinical trials and getting that logistical background good enough so that the outcome of the trial is the same as a traditional clinical trial would be. ILET is a gene therapy kind of trial. And then as from the point of non-communicable diseases, the burden becomes long-term. So any long-term illness, now medicine is evolving so quickly. We have new treatment options, basically. We can say from today to tomorrow, we can have a new treatment option. But we're getting all of these treatment options available, but yet the health outcomes are not getting better statistically. There's no linear improvement in health outcomes. The #1 mortality rate of, let's say, non-communicable pandemic diseases is heart disease, and diabetes falls right after that in the top 3. So it's the silent killer, and we have new treatment options, but we have relatively the same outcomes as, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. And we know that from studies and from talking to patients and from doing these analysis of so much data that we can almost certainty say that this is the burden, the long-term burden is the effect of the let's say, health outcomes that we were hoping for but didn't get. So we need to put an emphasis on mental health. We need to put an emphasis on early detection and diagnosis and prevention, because we have the tools for that. These options for early detections are very cheap, very accessible to the population and to every household, but we don't have the daily routine of using them. And this can save many, many lives and the overall health benefit. So the burnout, the early treatment, and the early diagnosis are all conversations that should be at the center of the table, rather than the system shouldn't be reactive. It should be the system shouldn't be reactive. It should be proactive. And that's what we're seeing at the EU Parliament levels, what we're seeing at regional levels, what we're seeing at the industry. It takes a village to conquer this topic, and I'm very excited that the patients are actually at the center of the conversation, like I said, and not, it has to be a team effort. That's the main topic. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will turn now to the pharma representative.
Okay, thank you, Alain. So just to follow what Mia was saying, you know, I'm a medical doctor by background, but quite early I joined pharmaceutical company. So 20 years now I'm working in pharmaceutical company, and mainly with cardiometabolic diseases. So I was able to follow what's happened in this area. And my understanding is there is improvement, but it is very difficult to improve situation with prevention further. Because if you want to improve it further, so we need to collaborate much better with patients, with healthcare professionals, even with institutions, all together. So let me give one example of hypertension, because we all agree that if we want to reduce morbidity and mortality from cardiovascular diseases, we need to focus on early prevention and specifically treat hypertension, dyslipidemia, which are two main risk factors for cardiovascular diseases earlier. But what is situation? Hypertension is #1 risk factor widely, worldwide. Why? Because more than 1 billion of people around the world have raised blood pressure. Second thing is that if you look to the slope in the curve on the right side, you could see that in last 30 years, number of people with hypertension doubled, and mainly in low and middle income countries. And this is due to aging of population, due to growth of population, due to lifestyle changes towards Western lifestyle and diet. And sometimes hypertension is seen like a disease of 3 paradoxes, because it seems it's very easy to detect hypertension because you just measure blood pressure. It's very easy to treat because we have treatments, and it's easy to control. But look at this graph. You can see that in red color that about 50% of people with raised blood pressure don't know that they have blood pressure. Then only 40% of people are treated, and only 20% of people are controlled, well controlled. So how to improve management of hypertension? One of ways is, of course, we need to improve awareness and diagnosis. And I need to mention a few initiatives. So if you know, last week there was, on the 17th of May, there was World Hypertension Day. And the International Society of Hypertension launched a huge campaign, awareness and screening campaign, Main Management Month, enabling patients in many countries to measure blood pressure free of charge, of course. So this initiative in last years was implemented in 50 countries and screened about 5 million people. So huge initiative. Another initiative is from Servier, because they say so campaign, which is awareness campaign in social networks. Last year, it reached about 90 million of people worldwide in 50 countries. So huge initiatives. But if we have objective that every adult should know their blood pressure, it's not enough. It needs to be much more systematic approach from the early ages to reach younger people, to detect people who have highest risk much earlier. Second, if we speak about treatment of hypertension, it's very interesting because we have very effective treatments. If you do randomized control trials with treatments of hypertension, so about 90% of patients will be with controlled blood pressure. What is the issue? Then you saw that in real world, it's just 20% of people who reach blood pressure control. And actually, these are real-life barriers because not all patients have access to the treatments. Not all doctors use available treatments in their practice. And also, a huge issue is lack of treatment adherence. In hypertension, about 50% of patients have difficulties to adhere to treatment. And it's normal because treatments are effective, but they need to be taken every day through your life. So this is a real difficulty. And now that's why real effectiveness of therapies is much lower than it was shown in randomized controlled trials. And our objective in the industry is how we can improve this effectiveness, that patients would have all benefit or majority of benefit which is possible. And this focus on treatment adherence now it's more and more recognized also by institutions. Here you see quotations from World Health Organization, from politicians. But in pharmaceutical industry, of course, we focus mainly on issues with treatment. So we are working on with a single pill combination approach, which is an approach when you put few molecules together in one pill, allowing to use lower dosages. That's why it's better tolerated by patients. This treatment simplification leads to better treatment adherence, and we are doing a lot of real-world studies showing that this innovative approach leads to better treatment adherence, and better adherence leads to less cardiovascular events and less healthcare cost. So this concept, although it is recognized in hypertension guidelines and recommended, still it's not implemented in real practice. And beyond that, there are some difficulties to register new single pill combinations, and that's why it would be also good to discuss about that. It's not enough to focus only on treatments, so that's why we work with our partners, developers of some beyond the pill solutions like digital applications, and one of example is Elfi. So it is a free of charge application which uses gamification method to motivate patient to follow treatment, to register blood pressure levels, and then to share with doctor and to discuss with doctor how to what improvements should be made. And of course, the last thing from our side, we invest significantly in medical and patient education. We think that this is crucial, and we are open to different initiatives. But if we speak about treatment adherence, so it's very complex. It's not just about the treatments, because factors really are not just related to therapy, but also related to patient behavior, to patient understanding of disease. Factors are related to healthcare. What is connection between patients and doctors? And of course, also we speak about silent diseases, so it doesn't help. So in order to have more stronger approach and really to find solutions which could improve treatment adherence and then effectiveness of therapies in real life, we need to collaborate together. And just one initiative, what we are implementing, we have project which is Alliance for Better Adherence. So we initiated this project together with European Society of Hypertension and 2 patient associations, so Global Heart Hub and SIA. Idea was to sit around the one table and to discuss what should be done in order to have more systematic approach allowing to improve treatment adherence and effectiveness. So I think that, like I said before, there is no choice, because how we can find better solutions to fulfill patients' needs without closer work with patients, and then implementation of these solutions will be through the patient-doctor connection, so therapeutic alliance between patients and doctors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alain.
And now we will have the third
Yes,
presentation. Cristina, what can a bank can bring in this environment?
Money.
Of course.
So investment, and I think that is the role of the European Investment Bank. And I think that first of all, what the European Investment Bank is doing to invest in these innovative solutions. As you mentioned, that the therapies, speaking about therapies, can come from one day to the other. So to invest in this ecosystem of early startup biotechs, medtech, which are, let's say, breaking the circle for those patients and bring those innovative solutions. And we are say at the bank, trying to support and to understand for companies bringing these innovative solutions, that these are not only treatment, as you say, that is one shot and the disease will disappear, but we try to work with all those companies, biotech, medtech, which are really understanding also the, let's say, the burden of this long-term treatments, and that they understand exhaustively the needs of the patient, and that they can bring solution for all this, let's say, complex disease management that is not only maybe disease treatment, but how that can adhere to treatment. We have long-term, we have long-lasting injectables for one company. We have other approaches. So as we said, we try to have this 360 approach, and to work with those companies where we really think that they understand the patient in the full complexity of the disease. And this is at the core of our investment. And as we said, we invest in Europe, and we invest in different stages of development of the companies. We can support from preclinical to late stage clinical development and pre-commercial activities. All these innovators in Europe. And that is what the bank is currently doing. But again, so we want to see business models which are really fitting the really needs of those patients, that they are working together in the definition of their business plans and the business models. Very brief, but
thank you.
What are we doing?
Brief, but very interesting. Thank you very much. So now we will move to the general discussion. And the title of our roundtable is supposed to cover prevention to treatment. So we'll start with the prevention. And in terms of prevention, it's a little bit surprising to hear from a pharma representative that you are involved in prevention, because by essence, you are and you have as a vocation putting new drugs available for treating better the patient. But what does it mean, prevention, for a pharma company?
Yes, thank you, Alain. I think it's important to understand that everything should be together. So when we speak about prevention and why it would be important to detect patients earlier, because at that stage we would have less damage done by blood pressure or by lipids, and maybe at that stage we don't need treatment. Lifestyle changes, diet changes would be enough. Then, if it's not enough, treating these two major risk factors like blood pressure and dyslipidemia allows to avoid majority of cardiovascular diseases in the future. So this is real prevention. I can give you an example of a few years ago, there was one publication from investigators in the United Kingdom. They published analysis, genetic analysis showing that people who have lower blood pressure and lipids throughout their life, they have 70% less risk of cardiovascular death, 80% risk of cardiovascular events. So, which is unbelievable, and it means that basically these diseases could be prevented, but focus should be on earlier prevention and on risk factors modification.
So in fact, it's treating to prevent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's and from a patient standpoint, what do you think is important in order to really convince people to think about prevention and to consider their future life in view of, unfortunately, being sick one day?
Yeah, so thank you, Alain. So I'm gonna continue the conversation from, I'm gonna continue conversation in that direction because, so at IDF Europe, we're an umbrella organization of 73 association members across 46 countries Europe-wide, so not just the EU member states, but Europe-wide. And we see it even regionally, that prevention campaigns, we do them every year for World Diabetes Day, we do them at the Parliament, we do them, each association member does it locally, at their cities, at their regions, at their countries, and yet still we have the problem of people not being diagnosed as at the early stage of disease. Rather than, there was actually dozens of studies that were published across the last decade where we know that from a diabetes point of view, specifically type 2 diabetes, which the major risk factors are hypertension and dyslipidemia and lifestyle, we know that there is a genetic component to the disease. So eating a cookie will not give you diabetes, but you need to be aware of your genetic makeup in order to be prepared for when the day comes and you're at that age range that you need to be regularly checked, and doing your yearly checkup is the best thing you can do for your long-term health. We know from studies where there was a study, the most recent one was where they stated that about 70% of patients with type 2 diabetes, on the day of their diagnosis, they're diagnosed with diabetes because of the complication, not because of any other symptom related to diabetes. They come from for the complication, tingling in their feet or their hands, really high blood pressure that was catched at a, like, you were not looking for it, it was accidental, and then the GP or the physician does the blood work, and then the high glucose comes up positive. So yeah, it has to be prevention rather than action, because the long-term damage that is being done at the moment is major.
Yeah, as you say, long-term damage is really the main issue. Cristina, the EIB is investing in a prevention project. You mentioned vaccine, but it's not only vaccine.
No, it's not only vaccines. We try to go beyond this part. So we also noticed that during COVID pandemic, so this is also a waking call for us. The COVID pandemic shaked the health systems in Europe and globally, and hence we noticed that there was a spike in the number of patients with numerous comorbidities, like even malaria, tuberculosis in some countries, and also cancer and non-communicable diseases and mental health. So in the terms of prevention, we think also that strengthening the health system in the countries which experienced the, let's say, the lowest level of preparedness is a way to help and to contribute financially or with technical assistance to strengthen the local health system, the primary health systems in those countries, to bring them to the, let's say, a common level, and hence to help them to screen patients, to know the patients, to prepare in a case of such an event. So the EIB in terms of prevention is also EIB in strengthening the health systems in Europe and beyond. And we have several projects that we can speak about, but this is the, let's say, the fundamental core in our approach in terms of prevention is strengthening the health systems.
So it's an important factor for you,
yes,
to decide to invest and
yes,
to select the project you will support.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's move to the treatment now. And in terms of treatment, I will be again asking you, Cristina, when you decide to invest in a project, I suppose, like all other investors, you are performing due diligence.
Yes.
What are the elements on which you are paying the most attention? Do you have, there are very classical parameters you need to check, but specifically in this context, are there some parameters which are really of paramount importance for you?
Of course, we have to have projects, as we said, which are in line with the European Commission and European, let's say, policies and strategies. And we heard that non-communicable diseases, cancer and mental diseases are key priorities. So this is of uttermost importance to us. In terms of projects that have the capacities to receive or to be bankable from EIB perspective, of course, we look very carefully and at the, let's say, to have a strong technical background to answer very clear identifiable unmet medical need that is confirmed by the patients and patients associations which are supporting this project. Mm-hmm. So we have to understand that this project will be, let's say, helping or supporting the real needs of those patients. We also look, of course, at hence the market. The market is really identified and is again substantiated by the number of patients, and we look at the stage of development, the clinical data that has been accumulated so far. We look at the, let's say, social and also ecological footprint of the company, that how engaged is with other, let's say, stakeholders in the process. So these are, let's say, for my perspective, key elements in going forward with an investment proposal from a European Investment Bank perspective. So this is key to us. As we said, we have prevention, we have treatments, we have follow-up companies that are helping to understand the outcome of a treatment. So we cover all this broad range of approaches in our investment. So yeah.
Okay, Linas, you mentioned a few minutes ago the fact that one of the main issues you are facing is the adherence or the compliance of the patient to treatment. And we can easily understand the need of patient involvement in the life cycle management of drug to optimize the disease treatment. But are you also involving patient in early stages, in early clinical development, and do you discuss with the patient the best way? Where are the most important unmet medical needs, for instance?
Yes, so I think that in Servier, but probably beyond Servier, in other pharmaceutical companies, there is major change in last years. In last 5 years in Servier, specific department, patient affairs department was created, and it's part of medical and patient affairs, like you mentioned. So what it gives, it allows patient affairs to be at the forefront of all engagements with patients, and to coordinate all activities in the company, that they would be involving patients, that they would address real patients' needs, that we would act in compliant way, and so on. So I think huge change was made, and like you said, this allows to involve patient affairs from the beginning of research and development until implementation strategies, what is treatment adherence and solutions, how to improve treatment adherence. I think now it's a must at all these stages include patients or patient advocacy groups in order to be able to propose advanced, much better and adaptable solutions which could make real impact. So I think there is major change happening.
And from the patient standpoint, I remember 25 years ago, I was working in the oncology division of Sanofi. And we started building contact with patient and patient association. And patients were quite reluctant to speak with pharma companies because of the bad image, but not only. Do you think this has changed, and how, from a patient standpoint, you see the different stakeholders, the investors, the pharma companies?
Yes, definitely. So there was a different way of approaching things many years ago, and the patients were always in the background, and I think that left a bad taste in many of people's opinions. But the industry is changing, I think, in a positive way. We are all humans. We learn throughout our lifespans and we grow. So there's a new era, a new need, and everything is kind of aligning in that direction. But I can vouch from the diabetes community. So even though we talk about diabetes as a general disease, depending on what type you have, it's different populations, it's different, I would say, characters within. So if you talk to the type 1 diabetes advocates, they're very vocal, but then again, this is the younger generation. The issue comes with the type 2 diabetes patient advocates. We have them, but they're very precious because there's not many of them, and we need to encourage them to, because there's a stigma. And the stigma is always the main issue why I would say patients are resilient to speaking to pharma, to policymakers, or it comes from an attitude, what could my opinion matter and what could my opinion change? But the thing is, every single opinion adds up to a big picture. So every single patient adds up to a bigger story. You might feel alone as a patient, and you might not see with your own eyes that there are people going through the same thing as you, but it adds up. So the community is strong, and it's getting stronger, and things are going in that direction. I can give you a hardcore example for one of my projects that I was part of. The pharma logistical team wanted to make the protocol for the patient test group that they would test their blood sugars 4 times a day as a type 2 patient on basal insulin. Most patients that are on basal insulin that are type 2 usually check their sugars once in 3 months when they get their A1C checked. And the logistical team was eager to have this protocol in place. And then you had the patient advisory panel say, which was filled with type 2, real live type 2 patients that live with the type 2 diabetes diagnosis for 20 to 30 years. Most of them said, I don't have the daily routine to test my sugar, so don't expect it from other patients like myself. And they changed the protocol. They had better success rates, better outcomes, because they had that patient voice tell them this is not sustainable for the real patient, real life patient in their daily routine. So that's just one simple example.
Cristina, you want to add something?
I think that it's important that the patient associations are working with private players, pharmaceutical industry. It's also important on the other side with institutional regulatory agencies, being European or American, that the patients are involved in all the, let's say, being clinical trial design, in setting of the primary or secondary endpoints, and the taking the secondary, and on the other side with a regulatory agency that they help them to align the development of the pharmaceutical and biotech industry with approval processes, with criteria for approving or delaying the approval of a product. So the patients are important on the both sides of the story to understand the development and the approval of prevention, diagnosis, or a treatment, not only on one side, but on the both sides of the story.
Yeah.
And on investors as well as a third component.
There is, before moving to the question from the auditors, there is something I would like to bring on the table. What do you think is really the most cumbersome for patient having to take treatment every day to check blood pressure or glucose, even if it's not very invasive? And I remember through my practice of hematologist, sometime when we were moving patient from treatment each 3 to 4 weeks to daily oral treatment, we were thinking patient will be happy. And very often, they were not very happy. Because when you have 1 day treatment each month, even if you are suffering from some acute side effect, after a few days, it's gone. When you are taking, and I remember specifically when we were treating cancer patient with interferon, for instance, patients were taking the treatment every day, and every day they were tired, and they were every day having not very severe side effect, but they were having side effect every day, all days, during weeks, months, years. What do you think is really possible to do in order for patient to live better on a day-to-day life?
This is a really, really great question. I would say that basically from the point that medicine became a science, We have always addressed the physiological response of the body, but now the topic of conversation is mental health and how mental health actually impacts the physiological side of the body. And that there's actually studies, I read some of them like a couple of years back, but I remember they were talking if a patient goes into the operating room and they heard bad news prior to their operation, their outcome from the operation is significantly decreased because their mental status was disrupted before the operation took place. Nothing changed in the protocol of the operation, nothing changed in the medication. There was no concrete answer in terms of this patient got sicker during the operation. It was just their mental status was different prior to them entering the operation. And this goes along with long-term chronic diseases. We have the medication. We have very effective tools to treating everyday diseases. But then we get the response that the patient's health declines because the patient gets overwhelmed with the daily routine of taking their medication. Doesn't matter at which way it is prescribed, morning, day, midday, or whatever. And hospitals and healthcare systems are not built for the mental health aspect of treatment. They're built to treat the body as a whole and not the mental health. And I can vouch even for myself or from my association members, people that I spoke to. It's not the problem of checking your sugar, checking your blood pressure. It takes like a minute of your time at most. But it's the constant reminder of, oh, you need to do it, and this is never gonna end kind of thing. And you need to address it, and everybody should be addressing their mental health, and it has to be a two-way street.
Linas?
Yes, if I can add from hypertension. I think one of the major opportunities in hypertension is to involve stronger patients from the beginning and of diagnosis of hypertension and in the follow-up of hypertension. Unfortunately, sometimes doctors don't have enough time to explain why it is important, why this is a silent disease, so why it is important to take treatments regularly. I think that there is huge opportunity to involve patients in the management of disease much stronger. And second thing, I think it's also opportunity to strengthen therapeutic alliance between patients and doctors.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. There has to be a healthy ecosystem between the healthcare professional and the patient. There has to be a healthy conversation, and the mental health aspect has to be addressed from day one of diagnosis, not later on when the patient is already overwhelmed, already fed up with everything, and is at let's say a standpoint. It has to be part of their treatment plan, basically.
From pharmaceutical companies, it's also interesting because usually we were very keen to understand disease, but now we need to switch also to behavioral science to understand what motivates patients, what leads to major barriers in real life and so on. So this is different competence. So I think we need to improve in our understanding of daily life of patients also.
No, I fully agree, and patients and patients' family as an entire friends, families, all surroundings in the schools, all this system, as we said, there's the strength in this health system at each country is important because it's one patient, but so many people taking care or suffering or being supportive is also important to understand in all the system.
So we move to the question from the audience. So I have a first question. How can we find out when the new plan for mental health has been finalized and becomes public?
Well, I think that it will be an official statement on the site of the European Commission and European Parliament. and on peculiar basis, if we can communicate also personally to the auditor when this is coming, but should be an official announcement. This is a priority. So June something was said.
And I have a second question. What are the views of most patient organizations on the issue of clinical trials? And it's a question directed to a patient organization, but I think not only. But Mia, if you want to start.
Sure. So we, as an umbrella organization of patient and healthcare professional association members, we have a whole department dedicated to clinical trials and, let's say, patient projects and EU-funded projects. It is important that patient organizations are involved in clinical projects because that is a direct opportunity for a patient to speak their mind and to give a voice to the patient. And we are really at IDF Europe trying to emphasize, and we're always pushing at every opportunity we get, that the patient advisory committee or the patient expert panel or whatever name that the project coordinators give it, that they're present from day one of the project or the clinical trial. Because there's no point of a patient being there when the data is presented already and analyzed. The patient has to be beforehand, and that's what makes an impact.
Yeah. Linas, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it just allows to have much better result at the end, much broader insights from different perspectives at the end, which is useful. So.
Mm-hmm. And another question, improvement means reduction in patient-related outcomes or improvement in adherence to diet and lifestyle and medicine. Any suggestion on how we can improve?
Absolutely. So this is a crucial point because what we speak about the treatments and lack of adherence to the treatments, it's the same question about lifestyle and about diet. So like I said, you know, in hypertension, treatment adherence, I remember one article was called as holy grail of hypertension. How to find real effective solutions. And it's the same for lifestyle and for diet changes. So we need to work together to find the best approach which could be effective in real life.
I'm just gonna wanted to ask a thought process. When you think about a treatment, let's say I usually think of a treatment as a cup. You have a cup where you drink your coffee, and you have a broken cup, like with where the seals are broken, but it's like intact. You can pour the best coffee in that cup, and if it leaks, that coffee is eventually gonna spill out. And that goes for treatment options and technology and advances in medicine. You can have the best treatment option, but when we talk about lifestyle, the stigma is people always think, oh, I need to, let's say, I don't need to eat sweets, or that's the only lifestyle change that I need to make. No, lifestyle means that you get enough sleep, that your stress levels are under control, that you have a healthy relationship with your job, with the way your day is structured. So you have a morning, you have the midday, and you have the evening. You have family time, you have friends time, you have exercise, and you have healthy food coming. Doesn't matter if you cook it or you have other ways of getting it, but lifestyle is a whole. It's not just one thing. So I like this. That's how my mental picture is of treatment.
Okay, I think we have some time, but not too much, before ending this roundtable. So I would like to ask you to deliver very briefly one message, one recommendation. How would you like to end this roundtable? We will start with Cristina and we will end with Mia.
So I would like to tell to all the auditorium what I say also to my colleagues, the investor officers. So yeah, please speed up with the process. Do not forget that at the end of this development is a patient waiting for a treatment, for a diagnosis, for a novel method to live his or her life. So this is how I say it to my colleagues, that at the end of the project is a patient.
Thank you, Cristina. Linas?
Like I said in my presentation, I think that if we really want to advance in the improvement of management of risk factors, we need to address real-life barriers. And for that, we need to collaborate better together and to find solutions which would really work in real life.
Thank you. Mia?
My statement would be to tie everything together in this conversation is that it takes a village to conquer the long-term disease situation and topic and non-communicable diseases. And so everybody needs to do their part, the patient as well. And yeah, that's my message.
Thank you. So I think we are at the end, and I would like really to thank you very much, because I think this type of exchanges is very fruitful, and I hope we will have other opportunities to discuss on this topic. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alain.
Thank you, Alain. Thank you, Mia, Linas, and Cristina, for the quality of this impassioned and uplifting conversation. And let's keep this very important conversation going at #HTFP3. We will be sending out a survey following this first roundtable. And now we are going to take a 14-minute break, which we will start again at 2:40 with our second roundtable with our new panel of speakers. So stay with us. See you then.